Welcome to the Strata Originals podcast. My name is Alan McLaren. I am the co-founder of Strata Originals, where we interview originals. They're people who start out and share the lessons and stories that they have to help us all learn and grow as leaders and as humans. Today, we are joined by two remarkable originals who need no introduction, but if you do need an introduction, I'll give you one. David Tsubouchi and Marc Kealy. Special thanks to our friend Mutual Heart Barbour for introducing us. And he exhibited the ripple effect, didn't he? Where he introduced us, and we're doing this podcast today, so it's perfect. So rather than reading an extensive bio, I will give you a summary of the two gentlemen in front of us today. David Tsubouchi is an author, former politician, regulator, integrity commissioner, serves on several boards, including OMERS and Tarion. David has received numerous awards and is an international keynote speaker on casino development, infrastructure, arts and culture, trade and politics, diversity, governance, networking. I'm exhausted already in business development, which means, he hasn't really done anything in his life. So, and not to be outdone, Marc Kealey is a former advisor to Prime Minister John Turner and the Premier of Ontario, David Peterson. As a chief advocate at Kealey Associates, he consults on public policy, healthcare, energy, gaming, mining process industries throughout Canada and internationally, and has extensive government experience as qualified through the OSC to serve on publicly traded boards and agencies in Canada. Today, we're going to dive into their groundbreaking book called The Ripple Effect, and you can see they have no qualifications to be here, so I don't know why we're listening to them. They're really well connected in the world, and we spent some time together about a month ago, and I really enjoyed them, and they're full marks for everything they do. So welcome, gentlemen, to Strata Originals podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Excited.
Yeah, it's sort of like being in government. I had 5 different portfolios, so obviously I couldn't keep a job. So you're right.
Exactly. None of us can. That's great. We like to begin with a little icebreaker, a little fun icebreaker. So, Marc, I'm going to start with you.
Sure.
Finish this sentence. I feel at my best when.
I feel at my best when I'm giving as much as I get.
Oh, I like that. Giving as much as I get. That's beautiful. David, how about yourself?
It's very altruistic, my friend. I was going to say, I feel at my best when I'm sitting in my office at home with my dog, my farm.
Listen, that's the question. So answer it how you feel the best. So let's get started on some of the main questions. So, Marc, I'm going to start with you. This book is about networking, or networking for success, for lack of a better term. Tell us how you both came together on this project.
So I think it's a great story too. It's almost like a yin and yang, Alan, when you think about this. David, I've known forever, and he's as blue and conservative as I'm red and liberal. But I think both of us have this sort of centrist thinking, and we've always. I think we've always sort of had that keen friendship. And I just remember this story, and it's in David's book Gambate, his biography, where he talks about this. I was in Queen's Park walking into 900 Bay, and I see him sitting on a bench, and I hadn't seen him since I think the election was over in 2003. I walked over to David, Marc Kealey. Oh, I remember you, blah blah blah. How you doing, blah blah blah. And that rekindled, and that was 7 years later, that rekindled a great friendship for us, and we never lost touch since then. And so when we came up with this idea about the ripple effect, both David and I thought, look, it was his idea. We've got this unbelievable and really decent friendship, Marc, that it's all based on follow-up. And there are so many examples, and I write about that in the book as well, about David particularly. Mm-hmm. But look, let's do this where you and I are editors, and we get stories, people to tell stories about how networking, especially networking for business, leads to success. And that's really the long and short of it, Alan.
Well, actually, you know what? When Marc talks about it, both Marc and I are middle left, middle right, and everything. So, it's we're in the same spot as are all our friends and writers. We're typical Canadians. We like to be somehow in the middle somehow and have good discussions about all kinds of things. And I remember once someone sort of referred to us as the odd couple. For more than one reason, because Marc's very tall too. So aside from the politics involved with this, But we both started thinking about this, and I lecture on diversity once a year at York University to probably about 250, 300 kids.
Mm.
And afterwards, you always have about a dozen keeners come up and want to ask you questions. And they never ask me about what I'm lecturing about. I mean, these kids are like a reflection of Canadian society when you see them come up to you. And they all want to know, how do they get to where I am today?
Yeah.
And it's because when I started thinking about it more, that when I grew up as a kid, and you know this, Mark, as well as I do, there were not a lot of people who look like me in politics. I mean, the only one I remember was Ying Hope on Toronto City Council. And so we had no role models. There weren't a lot of visible minorities back in those days, in the 50s and 60s. And so we had nothing to really say, they can do it, maybe I can too. And that was kind of the germ behind this, because we started thinking about how can we, it's not just for how do you network as a business person, but also today, and Mark always says this, about technology and young people today, they don't have the same social skills or requirement for social skills as we did as we grew up. And so it's kind of what we kind of like to share with them.
Interesting. You know what's interesting is that you've chosen to share stories, so it's not just about the two of you, which is a testament to everything you said, Mark, when you said, I want to give so I can get. This is that the book is an illustration of that.
Yeah.
But why did you choose that format and how did you select the contributors? Where did they come from? David, you want to start with that?
Sure. Well, first of all, they're our friends,
Then her.
and I mean, secondly, it just kind of evolved around this because all of our friends basically started with nothing
Mm,
and made something of their lives. And as it turned out, it's by chance, but we all like these people. They all have this likability, and they're all good storytellers, and they're all very successful in their own fields.
mhm.
But as it turned out, four are East Asians, one South Asian, one Indigenous, two Black, and many women. And they're all groups that have difficulty networking.
Yeah.
And so we thought, well, if they can tell these stories, and they're also good storytellers, of how they succeed, and by the way, in all different uh, types of business too, right, Mark? I mean, you've
Yes.
got
Oh, yes.
healthcare. Well, you're an expert in healthcare too, but healthcare, we've got government, some politics, marketing, education. So, you got a whole, buffet of different folks doing different things and somehow ended up in the same spot. So it sort of, and no one said no to us when we were talking to our friends, hey, Mark?
No one.
That's
So,
amazing. It's such an illustration again, the conversation we had about diversity to start out. The two of you are illustrations of that in Canada you don't have to be divisive because you're red or blue or orange. You don't have to be. You can agree on there's a different way to handle it, but you can come in the place for something of this labor of love that you've created, right?
Right.
Mark can confirm this. I mean, we come from a different era. That in politics, in our era, it was less about attacking someone personally and
Mhm.
polarization, and more about trying to. I mean, Mark, you know this. Everyone who gets into politics in our day, and hopefully still today, it gets in there to make a difference.
Yeah.
Sometimes they lose their way, but primarily that's why we've got friends. I've got friends that are liberals and NDP, and so do you. They're
Yes.
conservatives, right? I mean, that's the way it is with
And
us.
Alan, that's unique too. I don't mean to sound like this, oh, back in our day, but it is unique because if you look at the current environment in politics, particularly, there are conservatives who have no friends who are liberals, and there are liberals who would never even dare to have a conservative as a friend. And here are two guys who say, and we talk often about politics, and it's really funny because we can get into arguments based on philosophy or these, but there's always a common ground, and we always how do I say that, it always gets to a point where there's, yeah, you know what, you're right, Tsubouchi, or you know what, you're right, Kealey, and it happens all the time.
It's somewhat, as you think through the ripple effect, sometimes the word networking gets a bad connotation, right? But at the end of the day, what I read when I read the book, it's about connection and it's about finding commonality so that you can support each other in your efforts in life. And so, David, when you think through what inspired you to work with David. What are the goals for the book, and what primary audience do you want to reach? Who do you want this to reach?
It's for you, Mark.
To you, Mark. Sorry.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny because originally we thought, well, you know what, there's a hunger out there. There really is a hunger for how you network. But I think what most people, and we thought this intuitively and saw it really as we went through who was going to be a contributing author to us, is if you put in there how to, or it was prescriptive, it isn't going to be as effective as telling a story. So that in and of itself was the first premise. The second was, who's our audience? And you know what, Alan? One of the things we found as we went through this thing was how evolutionary it was. And I'm not being trite to say this, because we've been to different places where people are saying whether they're retired or whether they're middle-aged like us, or they're young people. And a lot of young people say, I love the fact that this kind of book exists where you could tell a story and not lecture me saying, if you do these 15 things, you're going to be successful. So it's really hit probably intergenerational in people. And we're astounded that this happened. But I will say this: both David and I have always been very, very good networkers. Both of us believe that 90% of this is just showing up, right? But effective networking means you got to follow up, and you have to be a giver rather than a taker. And we've seen far too often that people are always with their hands out or taking, and just never been that way. And I think people see that genuine authenticity in what we've done.
Yeah, Mark, if I could just add to that, we, if you think about it, people who are quid pro quo people are actually negotiating for the least you can do for them.
Yeah.
And if you remember everyone who's ever helped you when when you really need their help and didn't ask for anything, you know what? They need something from you. You're going to go way out of your way to do this. I mean, that's exactly what Mark's saying. And the other thing too is we discovered the commonality of all these things is it's about quality, not quantity. It's creating that circle of integrity and trust around you that everyone has everyone else's back, no matter what. And I look at when I was a kid, we, Japanese Canadians, we didn't have any money. We had nothing. The government took everything away from us and put everyone in jail. But so we didn't have any books at our house. They were a luxury. But when other kids were reading kids' books, I read every biography in the school library by the time I was 10, because I wanted to know what these successful people did to become successful. And two things. One, persistence. Two, they couldn't do by themselves.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of what Mark and I think and just feel all the time, that get people around you that are happy for your successes. I mean, everyone can give you sympathy when you're down, but when you're successful, you want people who will say, I'm happy for them, not what can I get out of this and how come this isn't me, right? And that's what we think.
You got me thinking about something my wife often tells me. How come you go to meetings and there's no agenda and you're just meeting people? And I said, well, I kind of believe in possibilities. And
Yes.
so how would you react to that? Did you ever get that from your better halves about why are you meeting these people? You're always out having coffee. Any thoughts on that?
First, Mark, I got stories for that.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh, me? Okay. So my wife always says to me, I'm a lawyer, and she says, we're never going to be rich because you keep going giving things away.
That's right.
And so when I was a young lawyer, it's just starting out, I used to do all kinds of pro bono work for artists because artists have no money. And so I remember one his name was Warabi Asuka. He was a little Japanese fellow. And I did probably 3 years of work for him, never charged him a penny. And one day he knocked on my door and said, you've never charged me anything. I want you to have one of my paintings. Well, since that day, he's won 3 Governor General's Award for illustrations, did the original Earth Day poster, published a book with Princess Takamado of Japan for UNICEF, and the paintings like he gave me are selling in London, England for about £25,000. And so, again, you're doing things for people, but they remember these things you do for them. It's and it's part of, I don't know, it's not the integrity part, but it's the optimistic part of what Mark and I really espouse all the time as well.
And I think just to follow on that too, Alan, I learned at the feet of John Turner, and I'm only saying this because I think he's probably one of the best statespeople this country has ever produced. It doesn't matter if you're liberal, conservative, or socialist, but he was so good at A, working the phones, and B, he always had these great turns of phrase as it relates to things like following up. And he used to say all the time, never turn down an opportunity if anybody asks you to see them for a lunch, just to talk. And this has happened to me so regularly where people say, 25 years ago, Mark, you took me to lunch to have a discussion because I needed something. And now they're in a position where they could give back and help as well. And that's how that so invariably. And I think that's really part of the essence of what we tried to accomplish in the ripple effect, because it really is a ripple effect when you think about it from that perspective.
Well, let's just use our little illustration. So you have our friend Hilton Barbour who knows you and loves you guys and knows about the book. He knows me, and I've helped him, he's helped me. We connected, had a lovely Zoom call together. We're doing this thing, and we know that this isn't over. We know this is the beginning of a friendship, partnership, support network. And so that's the ripple effect you're talking about. You know him, you're credible with him, he's credible with me, you've connected us. Now our worlds come together. So that's really what the theme of the book is. And we're not asking of each other, we're helping for each other. So you guys have it's magic what's happening and what you're illustrating.
If I could say David and I spoke at the Toronto Business Summit, and we were on the stage, and I thought it was a good shtick. We have a good rapport when we do these kinds of things, notwithstanding. And in the audience was Hilton. And afterwards, he said, "Oh, I'd like to talk to you guys." And we went with a number of us. We went out for lunch, and that guy, he's the essence of what the ripple effect is about. Yes. So many people, even right now, who are saying, "Wow, I got an advanced copy of your book," or I saw you guys speak, this kind of stuff. This is what we're hungry for. I have to tell you this. We got to give a huge shout out to ECW Press, who took a flyer on David and me and said, we want to publish this book, and here's what's happened. They told us this book is now being published in India, because young people in India all over the country are saying, we want a book that's genuine and for all intents and purposes authentic. And so we're now in print in India. Fascinating. When I was in Asia in February, I called David and said, "You're not going to believe this, but the book's come out, and the Chinese want a copy of this book in Chinese, because they're, even young people in India are saying, wow, I want this." But the benefit of this, and this is what I just love, is when you look at Tsubouchi and you look at Kealey, here's two guys that you would never thought would have this genuine affinity for each other, and it's worked so well. I just love that guy.
It's beautiful. David, go ahead. You want to say something?
No, I was just thinking, well, if you think about our writers, I mean, it's the representation of Canadian society. Yeah. And I was thinking about our friend Murray Simser, right? And Murray, I didn't know Murray. He contacted me through LinkedIn, and I got millions of people who contact me, want to get together and get something from you. But he asked me the right way. He said, could I give him some advice on his business? And so I looked into him first, and then I saw who he had surrounded himself with. All people that I had a lot of respect for, including this guy here. So Mark was already working with him. So that spoke volumes to me, because I have people who are my friends that have a lot of integrity, and if they are willing to work with somebody, that speaks volumes about someone like that. Yeah. So I said, I'll give you half an hour. And when I was downtown for a board meeting, well, we ended up talking for 3.5 hours. And we become very good friends, and there's a huge age gap between us. But it's interesting because we talk an awful lot. I don't really talk to Mark an awful lot too, but we just gained a friend, but also someone who is just has the same disposition as us, and that's pretty important, because through all of us we can be successful. It's like we all rise together, don't we?
Yeah, and if you get sorry, Al, if you look at some of the other authors like Mitzi Hunter,
Yeah.
who's also been in
Oh.
public office, but who's fashioned herself a real civitan, and I think that's and her message has been that way. Another one who wrote on a chapter for us is Susan Murray. Those who don't know Susan, like she is a wonderkind for this kind of stuff, particularly in networking and the value that she brings to the table. We're so blessed from this book, and
and a groundbreaker for getting women into politics,
absolutely,
right? I mean, and then our friend Young Woo.
yeah.
I mean, I and you do too, Alan. And Young is like he's Chinese, I'm Japanese, and when we first met, we started talking, and our upbringings are so close to being the same as each other, and we're sort of like we call each other brothers because we're just same experience growing up, same personal view on things, and he's the same. I mean, he just steely determined to do things all the time, but with also that level of altruism that all the people writing in this book, they all have that. They're not self-interested people. I mean, you have to have a certain amount of that anyways to be successful, but you need a balance between that and altruism. And everyone who is in this book have that the perfect balance, I think, of looking out for society, but also looking out, for their own personal success. You can't have one without the other, really.
It made me think about something. So, as you know, Strata's in the personal branding business, and everybody that you've talked about has built a personal brand. And this is the context I'd like to share with you. Look what you did to describe them when they're not in the room. All of them. You just mentioned Mitzi and Young and Frank. And so they're not in the room, and you're telling our audience about them, which means they built a brand of integrity and quality and all. And that's the game we're playing, is if we have quality people in our lives and now more people know about it, more opportunities and possibilities exist. So that's what you're creating. You're creating conversations and opportunities to say, but let the takers be the takers. We want givers in our lives. And that's what networking really is when it's not transactional, right, gentlemen?
Key
Oh,
to
you're
this as well as what Mark said just a little while ago about his advice from John Turner,
Yeah.
right? Not to turn down opportunities. My dad told me the same thing when I was growing up as a kid. And sometimes it requires you to learn on the job. And sometimes it doesn't work out well. But if you don't take that opportunity, oh, by the way, I have to laugh because I remember John Turner probably gave me the best piece of advice I ever had as a politician. He said, here's my best advice for you as a politician. He said, never walk by a washroom without going in and using it.
so true. That's
Right?
Turner.
You
Tell me
remember that?
why, because you're going to network with people. Is that why?
I don't know.
Because no, because you'll never get enough. You might not get an opportunity to do so before you get on the stage or do other things, right?
There is.
So
Well, it's
yeah, that
funny, Alan. I got to say this about David and me. I started working for Turner in '84, and we used to have these discussions about who do we have to look at. And around '84, '85, '86, he said, "There's a guy in Markham you got to check out. Name's Tsubouchi. He's on council. Find out about this guy." It was really interesting because that's even before I became very, very close friends with David, Turner said, "Look at this guy. Very interesting."
I couldn't run for you guys because Mackenzie King liberal government put all my people in jail and made us all poor. So I've got a historic reason for being a conservative, and I'll say progressive conservative.
Yes.
I'm one of the few people that stood with Joe Clark when that whole merger came about with the Reform Party,
Yeah,
and I'm proud to say that still in Ontario we're progressive conservatives.
that's interesting. David, in the book, you mentioned that the best connectors you've met are optimists at heart. Can you elaborate on that? I mean, clearly I could see that with the two of you, but just tell me why you've seen that in your world.
When you're a positive person, you really attract people to you as well.
Mm,
I mean, you want to avoid people that are negative or down all the time or just going to drag you down, but positive people will bring you up. And that also is displayed by their actions as well. I mean, positive people are more willing to help you out. And so it's all about attitude. I mean, you look at he's not a writer in our book, but our mutual friend Ted Manzieris, who started with nothing, but started a business, a waste management business with just him and his mother's K car.
Cake.
But he's the best. Yeah, he's the best. It's a long time ago, and he's the best marketer you would ever want to know.
Wow.
And he walked in the room, he'd light up the room with his personality. He just that and so positive. No, there's not a negative bone in his body. And one day, Maple Leaf Gardens said in the old days, they'll give him a chance to clean up after a concert. And so he worked all night and all day and cleaned up all the stuff. I don't numerous trips to the dump. And they said later on, we'll give you a chance to bid on our contract later on, not knowing just him and his mother's car. Eventually, he made that car and himself into a business called Turtle Island Recycling,
Hmm.
which ended up doing all the major venues in Toronto, including Etobicoke. Eventually sold it to another waste management company and for hundreds of millions of dollars. But here's a guy who drove it because A, he's positive, B, he has integrity, and all of his friends kind of protect him. We don't want anyone taking advantage of him, but that's the kind of person, and he's never says no. I mean, if you ever had raised money for a charity, he'd be there right away. He spends his time now working with Habitat for Humanity. I mean,
Wow.
that's the kind of person he is. So, and that's the kind of people that Mark and I like to have as our friends because, you're positive about these things. Things don't always go your way in life, but you got to take things and learn these lessons. I've learned more from my mistakes and sometimes my sensational mistakes than I have from my successes.
Interesting. Mark, to build on that a little bit, one of the things you talk about in your section is prioritizing investing in new connections early when nothing is at stake. But how do we develop that mindset in an instant gratification world?
I think going back to David's point about it, because you can see chemistry does matter, right? And people like to work with people they like. And oftentimes if we're at events or even per chance meetings, you can tell almost immediately whether you're going to like this person. And we've seen this too in some of the interactions we've had, even with some of the authors who have told us,
Hmm.
you know what, you can tell immediately if someone's a taker. And
Yeah.
I like to work with people who are givers because there's never an expectation that I'm going to be pickpocketed or these kinds of things. And so from that perspective, I believe that chance encounters or those kinds of things are going to lead themselves to good things largely because there's an authenticity in the relationship at the start, and that gets cultivated throughout the entire relationship, I like to think. So I hope I'm answering your question, but at the end of the day, it really is you can tell when somebody's full of it or somebody's really genuinely into this to be a giver with you.
Here's the opportunity in what you just asked, Ellen, is politics. And I always tell young people, if you want to meet people well beyond your pay grade level, become a volunteer in politics.
Mhm.
I don't care if it's, the liberals or conservatives. I mean, they're usually in power. That's why I used to say those two. But when you become a volunteer, they're very successful, powerful people that are also volunteering in these campaigns and year round. And they see you now as a fellow volunteer, not as someone who wants something. I mean, you can only join things that you believe in. You can't join things to be opportunistic. But if you do, then they have a whole different perspective of you. And then one day, when you might need something, well, yeah, I know this kid. He was a volunteer with me on this campaign for, John Turner. And
Yeah.
it's interesting how that can really, I knew nobody when I came out of law school. I was a, wet behind the ear kid. I couldn't get interviews because there are no minorities in law when I graduated. My family, my dad was a dry cleaning presser. My mom mended clothes. I knew nobody in law. I couldn't get interviews. Ironically, later on, when I, went out of politics, all these big law firms wanted me to work for them to do some rainmaking for them, the ones I couldn't get interviews 4 years ago. But it brings opportunity to you. And I got involved with trying to get a private members bill through, and I met through that. I worked with Don Cousins, eventually became mayor in Markham. Dennis Timbrow was our MPP at the time. I got to know a number of legislators, and Mel Lastman, who's the mayor of North York at the time. And through that, I got to meet a lot of important people. And so it's interesting how that can multiply your reach. But at the same time, I'm doing it for the right reason. I'm trying to help out the Japanese Canadian Culture Center. I'm not doing it just to promote myself, but by that I met a lot of people. So yeah, and I didn't need anything at that time. But later on, when I'm raising money for Don Cousins for his campaign, I met every business in Markham. All of a sudden, I got a huge amount of contacts in business. So yeah, it works out interestingly enough.
Mark, it was one of the things you used right at the beginning of our conversation was showing up. Talk to me about showing up. What does showing up mean in the context of our digital and physical worlds kind of coming together? What does that mean for you?
It's so easy today, to like we do these kinds of meetings, virtual meetings, rather than saying, hey, let's meet for a gathering. And that those things just don't happen anymore. And frankly, I know I could speak for David when I say that's lost, that a lot of people are looking for that kind of hunger. Or they have a hunger for that kind of a thing. So when you say show up, like I think the contrivance of events, and we do a lot of that, David and I, whether it's for diversity issues or whether it's to help. Like we did a big event in Markham when the tidal wave happened in Japan, and just the outpouring of people that came out just for that event was something that was heartwarming to both of us. But showing up is really, really important, and a lot of people think, it's easier not to go. I love this one story. Jim Flaherty was a great friend of mine, and he was a minister of finance federally, and he was having this event downtown, and he called to say, look, Mark, not a lot of people really want to do this. Can you drag out some people? And the reason they didn't want to do it, Alan, was because it was snowing. This is so typical, right? I thought so, but I managed to get 25 people to show up on a snowy day for him. You could just see he was just so happy that people had decided, this is what I want to do, regardless of whether he was a politician or not. The fact that some people came because they thought this is what you need to do is the right and appropriate thing to do.
Just remind me of my old pal Jim. I mean, she was years ago when I was in politics, when I was the consumer minister. Jim was my parliamentary assistant, and then when he was the Attorney General, I was Solicitor General. When he was a finance minister, I was Treasury Reports. We worked together really closely over the years, and he was a good guy. I mean, and I really thank Mark for work. But the other thing about showing up comes to my mind when I'm sort of thinking about this. And over the years in business, sometimes things don't turn out well.
Yeah.
But you still have to, in my opinion, this is part of showing up, is hold up your end of the bargain regardless. And that people remember that.
Yeah.
People remember people who bail on them. Yeah. But people also remember those who stood with them and did what they were supposed to do. And that's a rare attribute, to be honest, because it's so easy for people to bail their own self-interest and not necessarily see things through. So that to me is part of showing up too, Mark, as you know.
And one of the things that's lost, and I hope our book talks about this, is the RSVP. Nobody does that anymore. You can throw out an invitation and nobody will respond, and then you just, there are a whole bunch of logistical reasons why you want an RSVP, and I think that's lost a lot of times now in this current environment. So we hope that the ripple effect says to people, maybe those kinds of things back in those days, when you used to really RSVP, or when you used to follow up or used to show up, those kinds of things are now, they're not de rigueur anymore. They're actually important. I learned years ago, and again, I only because I spent 40 years with him, but John Turner used to say, if you meet somebody, send them a note.
Yeah.
Tell them nice to meet you. So if you have a meeting, send them a note. We, in our business right now, we're doing a heck of a lot of work with governments. And I always send whomever I deal with in government a handwritten note. And invariably, Alan, I can't believe it, that they actually either send me an email back or call and say, I never get a note to say thank you for having a meeting. It's just so, it's really wonderful.
It is
Yeah,
wonderful.
these are old lessons that we old guys remember, but
Right.
they're relevant to today. I mean, I think about it and getting an email saying, thank you for something. Well, that's deleted the next day, but you'd be interested. I've still got boxes of stuff from people that sent me notes over the years that that it's kind of nice to look at these things.
I was just thinking as you were talking about showing up, do you guys have any examples? One of the part of showing up is I'm doing something on behalf of somebody that asked me, it just I want to commit to them because they're good people. And something surprising happened that helped you, a person you met, a relationship, a business opportunity, a political opportunity. Has that ever happened to you guys that you went somewhere and I'm just going there because of David or because of Mark, but oh my God, look what happened because I was there. Did that ever happen to you guys that you can think of?
David, do you want
Yeah,
to
yeah.
chime
Go
in?
go ahead first. I'm thinking here.
I love this example. I get this call from a friend of mine. He says, "Oh, could you just come to this lunch? The lunch is with a guy. He's from Mexico, and nobody's really coming to this event, Mark. And I just need. Can you bring a couple of people?" So I went to the event, met this guy, very interesting dude. Today, that guy is the Secretary of the Interior for the government of Mexico. We become very, very close friends.
Yeah,
We send each other notes on a weekly basis. Those, yeah, it was just a chance encounter, and we became very close friends. That is the essence of what you're talking about, Alan.
100%.
You just nudged me to thinking about something. So, our mutual friend Danny Leung, years ago, called me up one night. He says, "What are you doing tonight?" And I said, "Well, nothing." He says, "Well, you're having dinner with this guy from Mongolia."
Oh,
Says, "Okay, I don't know anyone from Mongolia, so we'll go." Of course, we had to go to the steakhouse because they like meat. And so we just started chatting, and during the course of this, we started talking about other things. And I don't have my big collection. I collect signed first edition books, so I'm in my library now. I got 2,500 signed first edition books here. But my secondary hobby, I guess, is I've got 8 Japanese swords. They're from 15th and 16th century. So we started talking about these Japanese swords. He says, "You must visit me in Ulaanbaatar and see my sword collection."
hmm.
So after the dinner, I said to Danny, "Well, we both have like about 1 million points. So the next month, him and my wife Elaine and him and Angela, we flew off to Ulaanbaatar and met with this guy, who turned out to be a direct descendant of Genghis Khan. And he is a billionaire, apparently, because he's put us up in the former presidential palace with guards. And But as a result of this, I went to this big fashion show in his one of his facilities. I never sat in the front row of a fashion show before, but there you go. And I was sitting next to the fellow who's the foreign minister, who eventually became the prime minister of Mongolia, who then asked me to become the honorary consul general of Mongolia in Ontario, which is probably one of the best jobs I've ever had. I had red plates. There were only 100 Mongolians all of Ontario, so I didn't have to do anything. And I had privileges, and you couldn't give me a parking ticket either. So
I love that.
things worked out pretty good.
But what you've described is making an investment when you don't know what the return will be, because the right investment is giving back. I mean, that's what you've said. And
Yeah,
look what you get from that. There are probably dozens of those stories if you think back to your world. And one of the things we often say is get out there and let stuff hit you. But if you're
yeah,
not there, it's not going to hit you. You don't
great,
know what you're missing until you're out there. And the
great.
ripple effect is essentially both digitally and physically being out there and giving, and then good stuff will happen. What do you think of
Describes Mark to a T.
that? Describe
And
Absolutely.
and you.
yes,
Yeah, both of
Yeah,
you.
but you're younger than me, so I like being on my farm with my dog. You were still out there a lot.
oh yeah, a lot. But it's important, and it's not about keeping yourself relevant. I think that it happens because I think people notice that, and I speak for David as well, that we're genuine, we're
Yeah.
the real deal, and there's no BS, there's no I just think it's nice to be altruistic and to give back.
But the other part of this too is, um, you have you are like me. You have hundreds of people ask you, for things, and I do respond to people, even though I can't help them, and I can't beginning, I mean, all of us are the same. Someone always says, "Well, can I give them a reference for a job? Can I do this or another?" I say, "No." I consistently say, if I've never met you and we've never spoken, I can't do that because that reflects on me and my integrity. Now, the real smart ones will say, "Well, is it possible to have a coffee?" Well, many times I'll say yes, but but you can't ask me to do something that's going to affect how, again, the integrity of what my reference would be. It's like a lawyer. All these lawyers, not all these lawyers, but some lawyers will actually swear a document with a person not in front of them.
Mm.
I've never done that. And of course, I haven't practiced law for a long time, but I've never done that in my life. And I can say definitively, when they were asked me, I said, no, I've never done that before in my life. So it's sort of a standard you have to have, that your integrity is everything that you have.
Yeah,
And so you want to be with people who share that perspective of integrity,
love it.
right?
Mark, we're getting near the end of our, we could talk for hours clearly, but we have to end this at some point. So, give me what's something we didn't talk about today. What would be your message to the people listening about the book, and what would be your advice to them?
So for me, what I've learned over the years, especially as in business, as it were, is you got to nurture your connections, and oftentimes we don't do that very well. And so I think if you look at our database here at KNA, we have well over 230,000 people on our database, and it's interesting when you say nurturing, that you're constantly thinking about how that your that mutual benefit could certainly it can help. And for example, if somebody like David had said, if somebody's looking for something, well, I think I have somebody in my network that could help, because everybody, I believe, the essence of the ripple effect is about offering value. And I think so you're nurturing and offering value. But I want to say one last thing before you hand this off to David. One of the things I've noticed, Alan, is that people are now saying, hey, I think you two guys are onto something here. Is there a second edition you could do? And we're talking about that because we know, for example, in the United States, they want to see something that's particularly Americanized, with Tsubouchi and Kealey being the editors of that. Asia is another one, Latin America. So we think that there's a bit of a franchise for the ripple effect.
I
On
love
your point, though, Mark, I mean,
it.
in order for you to have that credibility, so like you or any of my friends, if they call me and someone says to you, "Do you know somebody?" that you may not know, but I may know somebody who does, and sometimes people call me as a result of that. If you call me, I know that I can help this people because you're not going to refer to me something that's, you know, that's dumb, to be honest, or doesn't have that kind of integrity involved with it. And so it's a reflection on you and all of our particular folks that are oh, hang on for a second. Um,
Yep.
I'm just doing a podcast right now, Elaine.
It'll be just like that BBC. We'll leave it in.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah,
let that BBC interview when the kid came in.
yeah.
Oh,
She wanted to take the dog out to the meadow, but I thought, well, we're almost wrapped up here. But I look at this and I think, if we can say to people who don't have, like, almost all of us started off as we're introverts to begin with, it's very difficult to do these things. But if we can set an example through these stories of how others can do this and really help them along their journey, I think it's a very positive thing to do. And again, if you look at the reflection of the representation of the writers here, these are many groups that have more difficulty networking and making their way to the top. And so they can look at these folks and say, look at who's telling me this story. Mitzi Hunter became a cabinet minister in Kathleen Wynne's government. And all these people, Garrett, good Lord, he took over his family's hardware business when he was a teenager, and became the founder of the largest private colleges in the country. So if you have the determination to do it, but you also, as Mark says, take the opportunity to do these things.
I love it. You know, the reason it works is because the word integrity and credibility are the words that just jump off of the screen at me listening to you gentlemen, because very rarely do people, you know, who are as well connected as you, think of others first. It's usually the other way around, and I think that puts you in a new category, which for the franchise, Mark, as you're talking about, just illustrates that there are people in countries all around the world with that credibility. Those givers, we'll call them. We identify them as givers. You're both that. And I have to tell you, it's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to spend some time with you. I enjoyed the book, and in fact, we're going to give an opportunity for one of our listeners to get a copy of the book. All they have to do is put a comment. There's the book. Put a comment in there. Hopefully, an insightful comment. Just don't just say great. Say something that you learned, something that was insightful, a lesson that you will take, and then we'll do a draw, and so that person will receive a copy of the book. But we're going to promote this a lot. It's such a great, important message for everybody, not just for young people, but for everybody, because what is it? Your net worth will be determined by your network, right?
Oh,
So,
that's great. That's great.
so,
Thanks
so
for having me.
I really enjoyed spending time with both of you gentlemen today.
This was a lot of fun. We really
It was
appreciate
a
it.
lot of fun.
Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen,